Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So Shop Talk, every couple of weeks, we get together. Spoilers, we're not getting together in 2 weeks. I'll just let you know that up front. That is the end of the year. People are going to be asleep. But we are here. It is dark outside. It was dark outside an hour ago, so it's now darker outside. But we're here. It's Monday. It's evening, East Coast time. We're going to kick back. We're going to have a bit of relaxation, talk a few technical topics, and there actually are a couple of good ones in chat that I'm going to get to even before we get to the main topics. But before I do that, I must introduce my co-host for the night, the one and only Mike Christensen.
Hello, everybody. Look, Santa got me some new glasses early.
Well, that's nice. Look at that. Now Mike can see all of the insults we've been giving him in chat. He wasn't able to read them before because the prescription was wrong. Now he can read them. So everybody tone back. They're like, no, we really do like Mike.
I had a sidebar joke. I was talking about doing a presentation called Learning Power BI the Hard Way. Don't do a star schema. Don't learn Power Query. Do a lot of DAX. I got a good laugh earlier today on that.
And actually, honestly, that would not be a bad intro topic.
No, I'm thinking about it for SQL Saturday, which we'll bring up later. But
you can also
and then bringing in a special guest, Dr. Mike Smith, who's the head of pediatric infectious disease, to talk about some of the science and stuff. But like the SQL Server, dashboard, Fabric, Power BI, all the stuff that has been painful but good learning experience.
Yeah. Now, you can also, because the call for speakers is currently open, submit a session for TriPass. So a TriPass, Triangle Area SQL Server User Group, we are currently accepting sessions for 2026. Tracy is in charge of all of that stuff, but I am going to drop the link in chat just in case anybody hasn't seen it yet. It's sessionize.com/TriPass-2026. It's probably easier to get that in chat. I'll include that in the show notes because we've had some good sessions so far. We've got things starting to fill up, but there are still slots open. So if you are a real human, not a fake human, no more fake humans this year. That's our 2026.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, it is actually. It is legitimately.
You guys have been very patient with that. That is annoying.
But we are going to promise only 100% real verifiable humans will present this year. Granted, no non-humans actually presented last year, in 2025. But
we had to prevent it.
Yeah, we had a couple of sessions I'm pretty sure weren't real. I'll put it that way. So we do have real humans in chat, except the problem is, how do we tell? If only there were some way to tell. By the way, I've never really liked the Turing test very much because it was always very squishy, and it's too easy to game. The funny thing is, I'm derailing myself. I am pre-railing here, but the Turing test is too easy to beat because humans are psychologically predisposed to take something that can put words together in a sensible manner and say, that's intelligence. You're human. And that doesn't really apply. I mean, Markov chains have been able to beat the Turing test 30-something years ago. So, of course, language models can beat the Turing test. And granted, it's always a question of how long can you push it until you realize that's not a human. But, so how can Robot Anders speak? If real Anders also speaks, I would allow Robot Anders to speak. I may actually make an exception, if it was strictly Robot Anders and it was a robot, not just some bit of software that spits out text or audio. I want actual physical clanking Robot Anders. If that happens, I will guarantee you a speaking slot. I will guarantee Robot Anders a speaking slot. I think the patterns in speech are always indicative of AI. Even ChatGPT has those patterns. Yeah, there are some very common patterns that show up, and you can still tell over enough language, over a long enough stretch, especially if you're trying to do something that is nearly a real-time chat operation, where you're going to get far too much in the way of response from the language model. But that's not even necessarily what we were going to talk about tonight. We actually have several things, several topics of interest. And one of them is in chat here. I'm just gonna it's not even an audible because the whole point of Shop Talk is it's chat driven. It's you folks having an opportunity to drop in some stuff and not even throw us off our game. Make sure that we never get on our game. Prevent us from getting on our game. So Millhouse in chat used string ag for the first time today. I'm a big fan of string ag. That came in SQL Server 2019, and it replaces one of the strangest mechanisms that exists in T-SQL, which is for XML path and using that to concatenate together strings, which technically works, but that junior developer who has to maintain it, you essentially tell them that's magic code, do not touch. Then they'll ask, well, what is the stuff function? Why do I never use stuff anywhere else? Why is this literally the only place I have ever used stuff in my life?
Oh, I've never used it.
You have if you used 4XML path for concatenation.
I did that when you gave me that big book, or you told me about that big. Do I still have it? Anyway, the big 2014 book.
Yeah, the Grant Fritchie one.
No, the one that was like it was like for the certification that's gone.
Oh yes. Okay, so that was 2012.
It's
been
gone.
Exactly. It's been gone. It used to be the 461 exam, something like that.
Yes. Yes.
That's back in the day. Yeah. So that's a technique that we've had for a long time, and it's confusing to people. So I'm really glad that string ag is as good as it is. But yeah, so that's a neat thing. Millhouse also mentioned it's too bad that some of Chris Date's ideas like table valued attributes and intervals never got in SQL standard. Intervals, yes. Intervals I would love to see. You do see intervals in Postgres, and I want SQL Server to have intervals, especially in window functions. That is one of the biggest pain points
window
that I
functions,
have.
right.
Interval. So an interval is, think of an interval as a time range. So interval, 7 days. And you have two different types of interval. You have the interval as in the static block of time, date January 5th through January 11th. Or you have an interval as in from a relative range, as in from the last 5 days. So from 5 days ago to right now. And both of those are valid concepts. They're valid concepts that we use extremely frequently, and they're hard to represent when you have only dates, especially if you're looking at things like window functions, where you want to think about a range of data, and I don't necessarily care about like 7 rows ago. I care about 7 days ago. And so the thing is, if you always have 1 row per day, then yes, I can fake it by using 7 rows ago and get the last 7 rows and show that as, hey, here's your 7 days. The problem is as soon as you have a missing day, as soon as you have a day with no data, like you have a holiday or you have a shutdown day or something, now that data goes missing and your 7 rows ago goes more than 7 days ago. Whereas if you think about it from the business standpoint, we care about the 7 days ago. And that's where you can have range intervals in window functions that will allow you to say specify a specific time frame as your approach. And so saying here, not a scalable approach, I would. Okay.
With the windowing clause, you can.
Well, I'm hesitating here because I'm not going to speak on behalf of SQL Server. I will say Postgres does have range window functions that include intervals, so it is definitely doable. Now, the question of how does it perform in a large-scale operation, that's why I am hesitating, because I know it is technically feasible. I know it is available in practice, but I don't know how would it scale if you have a billion rows. That's something that would get trickier. And interval data types do get kind of interesting, because if you start thinking about the interval data type that Chris Date came up with was essentially a start date end date combination that was packed together as one data point. And so this is to try to solve some issues that we have with that we try to solve in data warehouses with effective dates and end dates, or that we try to solve in sixth normal form style tables with a start date and end date for an attribute. And it would potentially provide some benefits around a couple of things, like being able to guarantee that you don't have overlap in your interval, and guarantee that your intervals are unique within that point. You can do it in T-SQL with start dates and end dates, but that gets trickier, and I think that is a lot more challenging to make scalable. So to that end, I think that would be a scaling challenge. Window functions having range intervals, I don't think is nearly as much of a challenge, because effectively it turns into you're still doing a scan, like you're doing a scan of the data regardless with a window function approach. So you're going to scan through that data. You may have to store it in eager spool into a window spool, not an eager spool, into a window spool, and retrieve the data from there. But especially in batch mode operations, we have things that search back over certain numbers of rows. We have things that search over certain amounts of data. I think it's doable. But again, I can't speak on behalf of the SQL Server product team. I can't speak on behalf of the developers of the product. There may, for all I know, be very serious technical challenges that make it a bigger issue than I'm making it out to be. But I would say from a business effectiveness standpoint, I think it's a pretty big deal. I think it would be a really neat thing to include. Okay. That said, a couple of topics for tonight. And actually, speaking of things that are neat and took a long time to get into SQL Server and that I really wanted in there and are somewhat better in terms of performance. This was not even on the agenda, but since I just thought of it, I'd better share my screen, and we're going to have our first article of the day. So this one is from Brent Ozar, and some of you folks
sorry.
What's that, Mike?
Literally one of my clients who's a biostatistician, he was saying, hey, can we use regex like we need to have level 170? And I said, oh, I'm sorry, that's 2025. We're only on 2022. So I had to send him an email saying, wah, wah, we don't have it right now.
Yep. Once you get 2025, then it's available.
Send me some money.
Right. So from Brent, a while ago, this was back in March, I remembered Brent testing out regular expressions in Azure SQL Database as a prep. You can do regex in SQL 2005 and up if you want to. Yes, actually, let me call out right now, because I don't know if he's in chat at the moment, but the one and only Solomon Rutsky, who is not, he may actually be in chat right now. So Solomon is in chat. So I'm going to shout out, sorry, Brent, but we need to go to SQL Sharp. SQLsharp.com, which is Solomon's application, is Solomon's library. There's a free version, there's a paid version, and among the features in this is a CLR set of libraries, and inside here we do have all kinds of different regular expressions that are available. So these are the ones that are available in the free tier. This is the paid tier. And so, yeah, you can go back, like Andrew said, to SQL Server 2005. If you install this CLR library, you can, in fact, get regular expressions that essentially shell out to .NET to perform the operations. And the performance, I have used this before. It does work pretty well. SQL CLR does not work in Azure SQL Database. That is true. So that is a really good point. And if you are using Azure SQL DB, that's where SQL Server's regular expressions library will come into play. But
and what does N4K ** mean?
So these 4K versions, basically, let me pull down 4K versions. By default, you have varchar max as input parameters. There is also a nvarchar 4000 variant because there's a performance hit if you have nvarchar max um, in certain object signatures. So basically, 4K variants are going to perform better than the max variants in many cases, but if you do need the extended length, then you can use the full variant.
So, quick question. Specifically on this, um, would you need to? So, I'm talking about an isolated environment that's partially Linux, and there's no Windows machines yet. So, would .NET need to be a separate thing? .NET doesn't come in any of the Linux distros, right?
Well, you can absolutely install that. Like I'm running Ubuntu, I have .NET installed on here, but SQL Server on Linux and CLR, I'm going to have to double check. It is supported in Linux, but there are specific limitations that are on .NET frameworks. You can't use Core or 5 plus, and it has to be restricted to safe.
Oh, they're on .NET 9, aren't they?
Yes, but basically, SQL Server CLR is old. I think old is the nice way to put it. I forget if CLR integration even supports the new .NET, which was .NET Core and became .NET, or if you have to stay on .NET Framework. Admittedly, I cannot recall off the top of my head. I don't know, Solomon, you might know, but long story short, I think it is Framework that's required. Yeah, stuck on .NET Framework. I thought so because, to be honest, they haven't put much love into SQL CLR in years, and the last time anybody messed with it, I think they made it worse with the permissions, with security. So, yeah, long story of that short, Mike, you do need .NET Framework, and if you want .NET Framework in Linux, you have to use Mono, the Mono .NET Framework, which does work, but it's not officially supported by Microsoft. It's something that I think you would have to muddle your way through to really get it to work. So my expectation is it should work, but it's not going to be as easy as Windows, where you install .NET Framework as a Windows setting, and then, or you grab the 4.7.3 or 4.8.2 or whatever the last version of .NET Framework was.
Well, in this specific client is a statistician who knows R inside and out, so they could pull back some data and then do regular expressions in R probably.
That's a possibility as well, yeah. And also, machine learning services does still exist. ML services on Linux, my recollection is that it works, but I don't remember doing a lot with it. But that said, you can absolutely use like RODBC and retrieve the data from SQL Server and then perform your regular expressions. That does require essentially that you're scanning your data and you're pulling it all back into your client, which for a large enough data set, that's an awful idea. For a relatively small data set or something where you can pre-filter reasonably well, it's fine. So yeah, that's the long and short of it. Basically, haven't looked at it in years. Guess I should test again. Yeah, especially because I'm shilling for you there, Solomon. So if you are on an older version of SQL Server, you can in fact use SQL Sharp, and that does work. But if you are on 2025 and you want to use the new SQL Server functionality, the built-in functionality for regular expressions, Brent had an update to his post from March. Back in March, the performance was terrible. He had 3 specific problems around CPU usage, refusal to use indexes, and cardinality estimation.
That's bad.
Yes.
To use indexes is bad.
Yes. And so the new version of CLR, much faster. So this is basically saying, hey, it still took 8 seconds to burn CPU for reading 10 million rows, but that was versus 60 seconds. So, cuts it off.
It's massive improvement.
Yeah, it's almost an order of magnitude. So that's nice. Index utilization, it does make use of indexes in some cases. So it does make use here. And parallelization, however, he noticed that the multi-threaded operations don't necessarily make things better here. and actually can make things worse. So he had a case where there's option with max stop 1 and option with just whatever, no max stop set. And the max stop 1 variant significantly faster. So this is a case you'd want to dig in to understand the specifics, but
Does that Intel Xeon mean that he's like on Azure? I mean, excuse me, either Azure or AWS?
I think this is Azure SQL Database that he's trying it on.
Yeah.
Versus,
because my VDIs have that. I don't think they're gold. I think they're more like bronze.
yeah, and I'm looking to see if I can answer Anders' question of what version this was tested on, and I think it might actually be his own local SQL Server instance. But anyhow, long story short of it, we're doing long story short. Today is the long story short episode of Shop Talk, but basically, I don't know Anders for sure which CU this was, if it was RTM, if it was one of the CUs, but it looks like cardinality estimation is still not great. However, index utilization is better, CPU utilization is better, and you may look at max stop testing different variants of queries with more or fewer CPU cores, and you might find something interesting out of it. So let me just double check. I did, in fact, post Brent's post. I posted Solomon's SQL Sharp. I'm watching a Chris Date course on temporal data at O'Reilly. Cool. That's Chris Date is very good. I have a lot of respect.
O'Reilly.
What's that now?
For data. O'Reilly for data.
Oh, okay, I see what you did there.
There's an ad on TV.
Yeah, of course. That advertisement shows up way too much, and I'm not going to try it. I am not going to mangle the jingle, but now it's all.
You're saying I do? Dang.
It's in everybody's head now, Mike. You have put it in everybody's head, and now they're going to have to suffer with it for hours. So next.
So quick sidebar. I know it's 6:22. There was a little thing that said we need a SQL Server vNext. So isn't vNext some of the stuff that the .NET Rocks guys do?
vNext is just the way of saying next version.
Okay.
Meaning,
because I know they advertise conferences and stuff, and I thought,
yeah. So what happens is that's just the externally accessible code phrase for the next version of SQL Server.
Gotcha.
That way you don't pin it to a specific year. You don't pin it to a specific mountain chain.
Right. It could be 2027 or...
Yes, it could be. It's just the next version whenever that comes out. And so that's just something that they've been using for quite a while. All right. Next bit. This one comes from Steve Jones and plays a direct influence on more topics for tonight. Evolving SQL Saturday. So Steve, I'm just going to give you the name drop here. Basically, they are changing the name of SQL Saturday to Day of Data. I got to admit, I'm not a huge fan. I think that's way too many day. Especially if you're a Midwesterner and you shorten your T's, you drop off the emphasis of the t, and it just becomes a duh. So it's Day of Data for anybody from the Midwest, which means that's just way too many duh. That's just too much for me.
That might help us grow in the future. It was already pretty big.
Post-COVID, SQL Saturday has struggled to come back. There are some nice events. There's still a pretty good number. I think the last couple of years have been pretty good, but it's nothing like what it was 2019, 2018. Yeah, Solomon's got it exactly right. That's exactly how I pronounce it, Day of Data. And I'm not. It's that. If you go to
Ohio, right?
Midwest, yeah, you go to Ohio, you go to Indiana, you go to Illinois, Minnesota. We're all going to pronounce it the same way. It's Day of Data. A?
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone's going to throw the A in there, but we are going to say, oh.
Well, if you're in Ottawa, that's just a little bit further north.
Yeah, and Solomon is from Chicago, so naturally, with the Mike Ditka haircut, they actually give them out for free in Chicago. So Mike does not have the Mike Ditka haircut, but he has got the uh,
Skull cap. I don't know what you call these. I had a fight with my buddies about this. I don't know what you call these.
those are, I call them a beanie.
Beanie. Okay.
Yeah, that's a beanie.
It keeps
Uh,
me warm because my office is cold.
so
Because
in
it's
any
so
event,
big. I mean, partially because it's so big, you know.
that's true. Mike's got a giant executive office. There's actually like an entire second wing to his office that we just don't see on camera.
I can show it to you. I mean, it's pretty big. I mean, it's Anders and it's the group. It's pretty big. It's because there's nobody here. I mean, it's not. I'm not famous or anything.
So there we go. That was the shop talk reveal of Mike's office. Hopefully everybody saw all the PHI that was on that board.
No, there's no pH on that part. No, I'm careful about that. Oh, you're killing me. I used to be an auditor. You're killing me, man. There's no pH on it.
For the record,
There's
there is no PHI.
RoboCop on that. I literally have RoboCop on my thing.
Well,
Alex Murphy.
Alex Murphy is a human just like the rest of us. He has his rights. He has his health information. I don't think it's fair to out him like that. All right. Day of Data. Dayofdata.org. This is the new website. It is right now. It's basically the skin of SQL Saturday. Just they renamed it. And for 2026, you can see that there are two options, and actually you can kind of see a couple of others as well. But we still have SQL Saturday, which is a trademark that is still held, and we can still use it in 2026. But I know Steve wants to move to Day of Data for future days. Now, we also have things like iAlytics, which I don't know. I don't like that. I know where they're going. I see where he's going, but I'm not sure I like that much. CQL, which I think is cool because that one's on a cruise ship. No, it's on a ferry. That's right. It's not a cruise ship. It's a ferry. But it's pretty neat.
Like Mark Twain. That'd be fun.
So Day of Data is probably going to eventually become the standard name. Just we'll have to get used to it. Maybe there's a different name. Maybe there's something else that will take hold, but that seems to be the way to go. And so Steve does make mention of why he's making this change. It's a couple of things. One is they've noticed that using data instead of SQL actually does draw more attraction. It draws more people in. And a lot of groups have gone away from being SQL groups and are more of generic data groups. TriPass technically, we've never changed, but technically we've always been a bit more broad in our emphases, mostly because I like to do that. So we've had sessions across a variety of different topics for years. It hasn't always been SQL Server related. And that's part of the reason why I've never really cared about changing the name. I mean, also TriPass sounds pretty cool. Pass may be dead, but it doesn't matter. We're still TriPass. TriPass was always independent of Pass.
Yeah, and I'll just add. I mean, it's going where it's going, but Day of Data. So SQL. I don't know. I try to like. A lot of my clients are data scientists, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know that much SQL," and I'm like, SQL is almost. It's like about 50 years old. Like, it's evolved a ton. So data is fine. I mean, data is fine. I understand, but like, if you don't have SQL in it, I don't know, because it is very SQL focused. Generally speaking, it's not always, but
yeah, and frankly, the conferences are still going to stay the same as they were before. You're still going to have probably 70 to 80% of the sessions will be SQL related in some fashion, and the rest of it, Power BI. You'll have you'll probably have some sessions around vector databases and some other work along those lines. Yes, but for the most part, it's databases. It's still relational or warehousing, and I think that's going to stay a focus. I mean, even if you are looking in Fabric, okay, there's the one session on KQL or real time intelligence. That's cool. You may have a session or two on Data Factory. Okay, data movement, ELT. You might have something on Airflow or some other topic. I don't think it changes the focus of
Right.
these events. I don't think it changes the target audience. What it may do is drag in some marginal people who may have said, I'm not a SQL person, but I do work with data, so okay, I'll come in. So if the name works, so be it. We'll deal with it.
Yeah.
Donald Chamberlain had an article and YouTube video for the 50th anniversary of SQL in 2024. Nice. I'll have to dig that up later.
Well, so speaking of that, so I was born in '76, so it's easy to remember I'm like the United States plus 50. So 250 is coming up next year. So I'm 1 year behind. Dang. 2024 was 50.
Yep. Thanks, Millhouse. I'll grab that link. I'll check it out later. All right.
Did somebody say Millhouse?
Yeah, that's one of the folks in chat.
Oh, I thought they were calling you Millhouse, like you had some kind of inside joke with like.
No, my hair is not blue. All right. So, next topic. Mike wants to talk about PG Lite, which, if you're familiar with SQLite or with DuckDB, this makes a lot of sense.
I gotta watch your DuckDB thing.
Yeah, one of these days I'll extend out DuckDB.
I have DuckDB on my machine. I didn't watch your presentation yet.
It's my old Bomb Squadron call sign. Excellent. It's a good one. We will not ask how you got it, but I like it. So PG Lite, basically this is in-process Postgres. So similar to SQLite, similar to how DuckDB works, ephemeral in-memory database. You can write data out, but this does not use a Linux VM. It is simply Postgres and WASM. Being in WASM is slightly scary for me, but it apparently works. There are framework hooks for React and Vue, so that's pretty neat. Is it like SQL Server local database? A little bit, yes. Yeah. This is an in-process instance of Postgres. So yeah, kind of like SQL Server local DB, where SQLite is, yeah, you said in process. Yep. So it is very similar to SQL Server local DB. It looks like it is pretty early on in its production. By the way, this is the first time I'm looking at this, so that's why I'm having to dig through just a little to see how it feels. Looks like it ties in very heavily. They have examples of using it with Node Package Manager, with Yarn, Bun, and Deno. So all of this is JavaScript library. My first TypeScript JavaScript client library, so you can use Postgres in a browser using it with Node and Bun. And that's okay, that's fine. So it's not nearly as, say, feature rich or functional. It's not really as functional as SQL Server local database or DuckDB or SQLite, where you can run those things in pretty much any circumstance, anywhere. And they really pride themselves on being able to pop this thing open. Like, I can run SQLite in all kinds of languages. It's there. It's a library. You import it. You're ready to go. DuckDB has 6 officially approved languages and another dozen or so unofficial but community supported languages. So pretty much any major language and some minor languages, you're going to be able to run DuckDB in process there. And even at the command line, you can run it at the command line. You can run SQLite at the command line. That's going to be a difference here between what PG Lite does and what those other types of in-process libraries do. However, the fact that this is 3 megabytes gzipped is actually kind of impressive. And mind you, because it is going to be Postgres or a very scaled down version of Postgres running, there obviously is going to be the memory utilization. But it also means that you can write SQL queries. So once you get things going and you instantiate your PG-Lite instance, you can just write regular queries, regular Postgres queries to operate on your data. And you should get many of the same benefits that you would have in a full installation of Postgres, which is going to be helpful. It's much more powerful than trying to write your own data filtering processes in JavaScript. So that's pretty cool. If you're running everything solely in JavaScript or in TypeScript, I could see this as a viable library. If you are using this TypeScript as developing a front end but not a back end, then it's not going to be nearly as effective. But a lot of companies do weird stuff like run JavaScript on servers. So that, by the way, is my official opinion. I don't like JavaScript and TypeScript running on servers. I'm not a fan of that at all. I think that's a massive, massive mistake in terms of language choice.
What about
And
Blazor? Is that just a
well,
flavor?
Blazor, if you're talking .NET Blazor, that's a
Yeah.
bit of a different story because that's still running IL on the server side.
Okay.
So it's not all TypeScript everywhere, uh, thankfully for them. But yeah, this is my hill to die on types of things, where I'm not a huge fan of the move toward server side JavaScript. I think that opens up more vulnerabilities. It opens up a tool chain that is precariously vulnerable
Mm.
and is very difficult to secure. So for those reasons, among other reasons, but those are the main ones for me, why I don't like it as a server technology. As a front end language, as a front end stack, I think that's reasonable. I think it's much less of a pain, at least, but you still have some of the same problems of the supply chain with any type of realistic uh, React library starts at what, 1,700 or so packages that you import just for Hello World.
Yeah.
So it's absurd. Um, and trying to vet each one of those packages, trying to lay out what's the possibility, what's the worst that could happen. The answer is a whole lot.
Yeah. So I had brought this up, and I was kind of interested because I had come across it maybe on Hacker News, I forget, but I'm obviously interested in Postgres, and then I was like, well, what's the use case? And then when you started talking at the beginning, I was kind of thinking about like, oh yeah, if you use R, you can like import like a SQLite library and do
Hmm.
all kinds of crazy cool stuff.
Yeah.
So this is like Postgres, but like obviously like SQLite can do a lot, but it's got its slant. But like when we all right, so when would you use something like this? Like would this be like for a website for e-commerce, or like when would you even use PG Lite?
Okay, best use cases I can think of for PG Lite. There are probably two or three of them. One is edge devices that are running something in Electron, which is JavaScript.
Electron apps.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
an Electron app is TypeScript, JavaScript stuff. Um, you could have a built-in database there. SQLite, that's been its fort for a long, long time, is client applications where you need a database, but you can't trust that the user has set up a database, and you don't want the user to have to manage anything. So you
Right.
have the database that's running in memory, it's running in process, the same process that's running your application. That reduces a lot of security issues, it reduces a lot of pain, it makes it easier for developers to write queries instead of having to learn how to like write reduced statements or operate over sets of data. you have a language that's really, really good at that. So you can take advantage of it. Now, another use case that I could think of for this would be on websites where, again, you need something that allows for the manipulation of data for maybe reporting purposes. And you want, I guess, if you want that distributed out really well. So maybe something that runs well, maybe something that runs mostly client side. Um, if you're running this all server side, I would wonder if you really want PG Lite or if you would if it would be better to use something different. That I'd have to think about to give you
Right.
a really solid answer.
Man,
But
I brought this up just today, so yeah.
yeah, so basically, I could see this mostly as edge devices. And actually, I think they had an example down here of where to use this as on the edge. And I think that's probably here we have use cases for PG Lite. So unit testing, CI testing, I can see that. I could see
Yeah,
building out test cases where you can have a mock. Basically, it's better than a mock because mocks, you're essentially hard coding what the result looks like. This would be a replacement library that, as long as you trust the replacement library is going to work the same, so you kind of have to test the replacement library to make sure the replacement library works the way you expect it to. But if you get to the point where you can trust the replacement library, it gives you a lot more power and functionality than what hard coding results would look like in your unit tests. And this also means that you don't have to have a Postgres instance stood up for your test server. So if you're building your application, you want to run a series of tests, you want to make sure that database calls are working correctly, then you have your connection string to spin this thing up, and that gives you a much more lightweight mechanism for testing. I guess local development, yeah, I guess, but I'd rather just have a container that has a database that I'm going to run versus using something totally different. But on device or edge, PG vector utilization, I think that's reasonable. I think edge devices in general, this is probably going to be one of your better use cases for it. Edge device electron applications or client side electron applications. Those, I think, are the sweet spot for this library.
So can you give me a quick summary of like an edge device?
Yeah, edge devices would be anything on a network. Wouldn't a container be better for unit testing? Yes, I generally would agree with you, Solomon. I think containers probably would be better because you can more closely fit it to what your real environments look like. I think for continuous integration testing, this may be a little bit better because you don't have to have, you don't necessarily need to have the same infrastructure built on your CI server, and you would not need to have it get access to some other databases. So for testing, for smoke testing, for basic testing on CI processes, I think that probably is a solid use case. But for some types of integration testing, that can happen. That I think you do want to have a proper database setup. For the security system I wrote where we needed a database at each door. Yeah, I mean SQLite. There's a reason SQLite is extremely popular.
Oh yeah, it's amazing
because it's very easy to use. It's pretty lightweight, maybe running on phones and tablets. So getting back to Mike's question, what's an edge device? Phones and tablets are great examples of edge devices. If you think in an industrial network, your IoT sensors are edge devices. The idea of edge is it's not your servers, it's not your core servers, and those machines are typically always the client in a client-server relationship, and they're typically
right.
not very powerful machines. So phones, tablets, your Raspberry Pis, your embedded devices, your IoT sensors, your specialized hardware for
Apple TV
yeah,
brick or
yeah, for operating machinery, all of those things we would consider edge devices. Is a car an edge
right.
device? I would not consider a car an edge device. I would consider some of the hardware that you would put inside of cars as edge devices.
Who asked that?
That was Solomon. But that
Because I was going to say if it were you know who, I wouldn't get in the car with them probably.
wow, shots fired.
I'm
Um,
kidding. I was complimenting his car. He has the Volvo electric car. I love it. He knows what I'm saying. Huh?
all right, so the OS handles the screen, the dashboard, etc. Yeah, that I personally,
That's all via satellite, right?
well, satellite will push down information, but your car does have its own operating system that it is running. Like Tizen runs on a bunch of these. Uh, Android operating system will run on some cars, and
I read when I was working on some C stuff. I read that a lot of appliances are all based on C.
sure, C is a classic embedded programming language. So most of your stuff is your devices are going to be written in lower level languages. Basically, it's controlled memory management. You're dealing with a very constrained hardware, and you want to try to get the most out of that hardware. So that's where a language like C comes in versus using Java or C sharp or uh,
F sharp.
other such languages like that, which make life easier in the sense of you get a lot more going for you, but at
You get a
extreme
little teeny chip. Yeah.
yeah, at extreme performance,
Yeah.
you kind of need extreme languages. And actually, you'll probably see assembler being used pretty very often as well for some of the smallest devices. Those that tends to be still a reasonably common language for very small embedded devices. And I mean, we also think about things like refrigerators or other stuff that I get angry about that have such electronic components. But yeah, user settings get stored. The car stores sensor data that dealerships download.
Even my old Nissan Leaf, it's from 2015. Do you want to? It'll ask me once a month. They're like, do you want to like share your data? And I say decline. Like, I mean, that's a 10-year-old car.
Yeah, yeah. So they do, and quite often they'll have 3G or 4G chips in the car to push that data up to a server. And you can really you could pay extra money and be able to use that for a hotspot, but by default they'll only push it to their servers. They'll push the data to their servers for free. But
Oh,
yeah.
true story. This is a sidebar. I know we're getting late. I I have like my batteries that I recharge in a little thing, and I never really looked at it closely, but like it says iPhone 3G on it, and I was like, oh man, is that like from 2008? Like when is that? Like so I kept the box for my iPhone from I don't know I don't know what iPhone 3G. I gotta Google it. What year was that? It was maybe the first 2009.
Maybe I
Yeah, first released in 2008, discontinued in 2010. Yeah, so I was pretty close. Yeah, so anyway, I have the box and I put my batteries in it. One on the one side, the batteries are discharged, and the other ones are recharged because I have rechargeable batteries. I was like, oh dang, that's old.
there's a pretty old box. All right. Had a 2012 Leaf, gave it away, and it's still working. That's,
You gave it away? Is that
that was Millhouse.
Anders? Oh, Millhouse. Yeah, I do need a new one. My battery is I lost 3 bars total from 2015, so it's not bad, but like it's getting inconvenient. I think that Kevin has been very patient with me because I ask him a million questions about his Ionic 5 because I really want one. Soon, we'll see.
Sold for $300. Range was 40 miles.
Yeah, mine goes in the mine probably goes like when I first got it, it went like 85, 90. Now it goes like 60 if I'm lucky. I don't drive a lot, but
Probably not 60 at this time of year.
It's getting annoying. It's getting annoying.
Yeah. Okay. Next article. This one Mike wanted to talk about. This actually is something I put in curated SQL. Could we drop a good SQL fact before the call-in? Something good for a newbie to learn. I think we could.
Simple fact.
Yeah. SQL facts. I'll leave chat to see if you can come up with some interesting SQL facts while I talk about Dax Lib. So this is from Marco Russo, one of the Italians, and Dax Lib is. I'll share this link as well. There we go, and then daxlib.org. So this is a website that Marco and Alberto at SQL BI have set up for.
They are awesome. Thank you for recommending them because I have watched a bunch of their videos and I'm going to buy some of their training.
Yeah, absolutely. So they are fantastic. They are major parts of the community for business intelligence, and they, along with Kurt Bueller, have set up Dax Lib, which they're basically trying to pin this as the app store for Dax user-defined functions, and it's a repository of these user-defined functions. It ties in well with their Tabular Editor 3, the paid product that they offer, but you can get these libraries for free. There are currently 33 of them available, and I'm actually going to zoom that out one level. You can see who publish each one of them. So speaking of Kurt Bueller, he's got the first one out here. Published my first DAX function out to production today. Well, excellent. That's congratulations. And you can see some examples in here like evaluation context color. Let's take a look at this one. For each one of these, you'll have different versions. This feels almost like PyPy in that regard. You have a GitHub repository. You have bugs and project locations. You can see information on the left-hand side about publishers and licenses. License being very important. This one, for example, is published MIT license, so legal departments aren't going to get angry about it. You have concepts that you can implement, and if we go to the website, probably can find some decent examples of how this thing works. So just a couple of quick examples. You can download a PBIP file, a Power BI project.
Is that the new format? There's a lot of problems with the new format.
This is the new format. This is the one that you can check into source control.
Yeah.
And you can also download the library from Dax Lib. So this is pretty neat. I think they've done a good job, they being the Italians. They've done a good job of making all of this accessible to people to try to encourage more development of DAX user-defined functions. And to the extent that makes it easier, it makes it easier for people to find good code, to make use of good code, and to reuse good code. I'm all for that.
Yes, me too, because I've been on my journey and had a great lunch with Kevin, and he was like, spend an hour on Power Query, and I was like, yeah, 25 hours in.
Yep. And I'll reiterate that here as well, that we're talking about DAX. There are good use cases for DAX, but
Right.
if you're not familiar with Power Query is the first language I think you should learn if you're a Power BI person, meaning you're responsible not just for consuming reports, but creating data models, the semantic models. Power Query or M, that's going to be a critical language. I think if you spend time, an hour learning Power Query will save you several hours learning DAX.
I was joking about like having a presentation saying, learn Power BI the hard way. ... Right. And I have a bunch of examples. This is just one. And a lot of my colleagues thought it was pretty good.
Yeah. So for that reason, I definitely argue in favor of learning Power Query, of understanding Power Query, understanding the model, the star schema model that Power BI wants, that Ralph Kimball came up with, and just really knowing that fact dimensional model.
Yes. So that's the big. So Noah is one of our engineers that is kind of leading the effort in the transition. He calls it the soapbox, but he's like star schema. You gotta have a star schema, and I totally understand him. I think I came from like the business objects world where like there was a business objects administrator that would make the universe behind the scenes and do the one to many and the one to one.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to.
Oh yeah, we got it.
I'm actually going to end this with thinking about, hey, what's a nice SQL fact before the call ends? And this reminded me of a blog post from Lewis Davidson. It's about a month old, but this built off of an offhand comment that I had on Curated SQL when I looked at his prior example of writing a temporary stored procedure out. So actually, here's my message. Basically, Lewis had a series of queries and wanted to write out statuses and information about them. And I said, hey, you should use format message because you can have things like add time to message flag, add SPID to message flag, add original login to output flag. If I look at his original query, there we go. This is what he had. So he had concat and all of these spaces and colons, and it works. It works. But it's less than ideal. It's a little bit harder to troubleshoot. It gets a little bit messy. And so I told him, well, hey, just use format message because this thing was literally written for writing out error messages. And we have %s, 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 %s. So I have here, if you have the add time to message flag, then concatenate message time and sys date. If you have add SPID to message flag, etc. And you can see you have these bits that are written out. And I think that it makes things a lot easier to read. And even further, format message right in here, %s message time, %s process ID, %s login user ID. This would be if you do not need the optionals, if you just want everything to always show up in this way. That makes this function even easier to read. So Lewis picked that up and went a little bit further in terms of learning about format message and getting a pretty decent feel for the function. This is a function that I think a lot of people have not heard of before. This came out in SQL Server 2016, so it's been out for a decade, and very few people have actually used it, I think. It was originally intended to help define messages, to help define error messages easier, but you can use it in all kinds of situations. So this is an example of where you can use it pretty reasonably. And so he kind of builds off of some of the code that he built and going in his own formatting, his own style. And he's like, why not just use raise roar? And here's your other SQL fact for the day.
Raise error.
Technically, it's pronounced raise roar. It's silly.
Nerd.
It is silly.
You're more of a nerd than I.
Yeah, it is silly that they call it raise roar, but that's because there's only one E.
You're technically correct. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and actually, this is from Sybase. So Sybase had, if you had at the end of a word and the beginning of the next word had the same letter, they would only type it once, and the idea was that it would reduce the number of typos because everything is all capital letters. It's all caps. It's not Pascal case or camel case where you can easily see the split between words. And so something like format message, because T and M are obviously different letters, you would have them be just the full word. But if you have raise and error, then it became one letter instead of doubling it, and the pronunciation changes because everybody's got to be weird that way. So it's raise roar technically, but I'm always going to call it raise error. And that is something that Sybase gave us and that we've had ever since. So
I thought it was funny when we had Brent. he said, "If you bring up Sybase one more time, I'm going to kick you out." I thought it was kind of funny. It wasn't you; it was somebody in
No,
the
no, there's
audience.
somebody in
That was pretty funny.
yeah, for context, at our SQL Saturday last year, where Brent Ozar was, or this year, where Brent Ozar was the pre-con speaker,
Recon, yeah.
there was one person in the audience who was always comparing things to Sybase, and that, um, that was probably as many references to Sybase between this episode of Shop Talk and that SQL Saturday. That was almost 100% of Sybase references for the entire year. And I think that's fine. That's fine as it is. Sybase was where SQL Server came from. It is. It is. Microsoft worked with Sybase, and then Microsoft bought the code base from Sybase. So early on, it was Sybase SQL Server. And somebody's probably got disks that still read Sybase SQL Server. Incidentally,
Yeah.
Sybase is still around. They have their own database still around. So Microsoft bought a copy of the source code and then went off in their own direction. SQL Server from Microsoft is now not at all like what Sybase was. However, there are still in the T-SQL language, Transact SQL language, and in some of the legacy code, there is still that Sybase imprint on there. And about the only places I've heard of still using Sybase today, most of them are New York financial institutions that they've been using Sybase for decades and that they will just keep doing Sybase. Wasn't it a joint project to port Sybase to Windows NT? I think you're right, Solomon. I think so. And then I think what happened was Microsoft basically just bought a copy of the code to do with what they want.
Well, they don't have that much money, so I don't know how they did that.
And just a couple bucks.
So we have to talk about. I mean, we're over time. We got to talk about. You know what?
We do. Where they had a disagreement on direction and went separate ways. I don't remember the exact details there. You might be right, Solomon. Would not shock me at all. I mean, OS2 Warp was around the same time, so wouldn't be shocked. But I think it was originally done for OS2. Hey, there we go. But yeah, so talking about the thing that Mike wants to talk about that we're technically over time for, but we're still going to talk about it. SQL Saturday Raleigh had a change of date. Mike's got it down. May 23rd. Saturday, May 23rd. We tried to avoid any graduation dates for colleges. We tried to avoid other events. We tried to avoid holidays. Tried to make it so that it wasn't too horribly hot, although it's going to be late May, so it's going to be pretty hot here. But we'll deal with it. So, yeah, that's the plan. We're going to start getting SQL Saturday Raleigh 2026 or Day of Data Raleigh 2026. We'll see. Raleigh Date of Data. I don't know. We'll play with the names. But we do plan to get this out. We'll get it on the website. We'll get things rolling for it. Whether there will be a pre-con or not, that's something we still have to decide. But we do have the date locked down at Duke Health. So we will be back where we were this year. Same bat place, different bat time, but same bat channel. So we've got that going for us. Also, tomorrow, final in-person meeting of the year. So come check us out. We're going to be at Tech Systems tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to grab that information, it's meetup.com/tripass. We will not have a Shop Talk episode on the 29th. Our next episode of Shop Talk looks like it's going to be January 12th. And that'll be right before, we won't have an Advanced DBA meeting. So actually, yeah, let me talk about that as well. I did mention it for the Advanced DBA people last week, but we are going to every second month for Advanced DBA sessions, and Tracy is going to be more selective in what we pick for those Advanced DBA sessions. So something like Torsten Strauss and what he did last week for us, that's exactly the kind of content we're looking for. Some of the Advanced DBA sessions, I think we're not very advanced. So we do want to try to raise the level, but that's going to involve not as many sessions this upcoming year. And
that would be like hardcore internals or like index fragmentation, or I got
it won't necessarily be just DBA topics, but the advanced is what we're going to specify, where I don't want it to be like an introduction to vectors, which,
Yeah,
okay,
I remember when we were at the University Tower. This is a long time ago, but had somebody from auto parts, and they were a PhD that like
yep,
knew every license plate in the country, and like their inventory was based on like data and analytics. That was awesome.
yeah. So really getting more in depth. Yeah, more TG, less Anders. I think that's a good way of putting it, and honestly, less me as well for the advanced sessions. But that's our goal. That's our aim. We're going to see how it works in 2026. We may pivot again, but it is what we're looking at doing right now. So with that, we're going to wrap things up for the year. We will be back in the new year. In the meantime, there will be a TriPass news and notes where we've also officially announced SQL Saturday. Once I start getting some more information on the website, once I get some things pushed out, we will move forward with that. But until we do see each other, maybe tomorrow, if not, sometime in the new year, have an enjoyable rest of your year, and take care.